really need to go through that exercise of talking to a professional, hopefully someone in our office, that could then sit down and go kind of line by line of what outstanding debts do you have today? What is the interest rate, the monthly payment, the years remaining, and then take a snapshot of your overall plan and say, okay, maybe here's some ways we could tackle that.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Blue Collar Wealth Podcast, and we call it that because this is a show about real finance for real people. We often get asked, what kind of clients do you work with at Stonehouse? And the term that I always like to use is blue collar wealth. Most of our clients, they have anywhere from $500,000 to many millions of dollars saved up in their retirement, but they don't necessarily care about buying a giant boat or yacht and sailing that thing over to the south of France. Instead, most of our clients are asking us about how much they can squeeze more juice out of their retirement and live a long, happy, healthy life. My name is Bob Brown. I'm a certified financial planner and a founding partner here at Stonehouse Retirement Income Planners. I've had the privilege of helping many families plan and live their lives for probably over 20-some years now. I'm part of a growing team here at Stonehouse, and we've seen our clients go through a ton of different things in their lives. And now, thanks to the beauty of the podcast, we can share some of those stories and maybe some shortcuts to help you get on track and hopefully stay on track with your own finances. In this episode, we're going to have a surprising conversation about debt and why it's not all bad. You may very well be feeling overwhelmed about the amount of debt that you're burdened with today. And maybe you've been frustrated because you can't seem to make a dent in it, or even to decide which of several debts that you should pay off first. Or maybe you're not even sure where to start. You're not alone in this. So many people feel this way. So by the end of this podcast, I hope that we're able to get you to a better place where you can understand the difference between good debt and bad debt, and maybe some very cool strategies to attack these piles of debt that you're living under and knock them down. And most certainly, we want to give you a great place to start with that. So to help me discuss destroying your debt, I brought in Kirk Lunger. Kirk is a senior advisor here at Stonehouse and has years of experience working with people just like you who are navigating through their own personal debt-tastrophe. Let me ask, a thumbs up or a thumbs down on the debt-tastrophe word?
Neutral. I could be swayed to the thumbs up, but right now I don't have a strong feeling.
Always the politician. Okay, let's get right into it. We were talking before the cameras were rolling about whether or not there's sort of two different types of folks in the world that we work with, and that's the folks leading up to retirement, maybe 5 years away or so, and then the folks who are in retirement. And debt, as you were saying, debt looks different for those who are still making regular income checks and maybe have more flexibility to pay things down versus somebody who's already rolling into the retirement. So how do you approach the two different types?
Yeah, I think the first thing within any debt management review is that all debt is not created equal. You can look at things and say, well, there's good debt and bad debt. What does that mean? Because if you're not a finance expert, you might be thinking, how do I decipher the two?
Right.
Generally, keep it simple is generally a good way to look at things. High interest rate credit card debt at 20 to 30% interest is not good debt.
Right.
That would be bad debt. Unless you're an investment whiz, you're not likely to earn a greater rate of return that's higher than that justifies you paying 20 to 30% interest.
Right.
However, on the opposite side of the coin, low interest rate mortgage debt, because not everyone has enough cash just to go saved up and pay down, especially in the era in the last 10 years of lower mortgage rates versus 30 years ago when we had double digits for primary mortgages. It's a better time to look at a mortgage with, say, a 3.5% to 4.5% interest rate and think, boy, that's manageable. Yep. I might be comfortable making payments on that because my investment risk might be high enough where then I could earn a greater rate of return above that by putting more of that capital to work in stock and bond markets.
Yep.
So that is just one way to look at debt. There's all different other types, of course, student loan, credit card, auto loan, mortgage, just home equity, just rattling these off. Each one of them has a different characteristic to it of how it fits in your plan. And then, to your point, if I'm in retirement and looking at where my payments are, I may evaluate my portfolio and take a look at to see, does it make sense to take out a chunk of money to get rid of that payment? Because now I probably need a lower withdrawal, considering if, let's say, I took my automobile and I have 2 years left and 4% interest, and I think, boy, my investments have done very well. Maybe I look to take some of that gain and just eliminate this payment. I'm going to keep that vehicle for a considerable amount of time. So I want to kind of lock in that rate and pay that off, eliminate the bank from a financing perspective, and own the asset outright. Just as an example of something we might come across. So what we need to do then as an advisor is evaluate your plan and see if it makes sense to do that, to be able to take out that lump sum of money to eliminate that payment, and what the net effect is for a period of time where you'll presumably be drawing a smaller amount out.
Yeah. So I know I've had this happen. Numerous people over 20 some years, and I hate to say it, but they don't see the forest through the trees, I guess I want to say. And what I mean by that is, hey, I just want to be debt free. I want to pay my house off. It's like maybe the last big debt that I have over my head. I just want to be able to say I'm debt free. I need $75,000 to make that final payment. And, depending on what they have, that might not be a ton. I mean, so that's a lot of money, no matter how much money you have, in my opinion, but it might not overly affect the plan. But more importantly, the place they're taking it from is their retirement account. And so as well as I do, you're not taking $75,000 out of that. You're probably taking at least $100,000 out of that, because you're going to have to pay the government. You're going to pay the taxes on that. So you need to take out 100 to net 75 to go pay off the bank. When in a sense you could really just finance, maybe that's, as we've seen in the last decade, refinance that down to a much lower rate. But yet still they just want to be debt-free. It's just this thing that people have.
They also sometimes fail to foresee what that future value could be with potential growth above and beyond that. So There's the current amount you need to eliminate the debt, the taxation that may impact what you need on top of that, but then there's the potential loss of future value that would be foregone as well.
Yes.
Which again is a potential. There's risk in any investment, but that is a huge component of this. The other side too is, we need to look at someone's nest egg, because if we're talking about taking out a much larger percentage of someone's overall nest egg, again, I don't care what your nest egg is, whether it's 200,000, 500,000, or 2 million. The reality is the larger percentage of that nest egg we're taking out to eliminate a payment or multiple payments, we then have to ensure that we're not taking too much out, where then now we're eroding any future growth you may have. And I've seen that several times with folks that are maybe in transition and they're leaving job A, taking job B, and saying, I just want to be debt free. I want the car and the home. I want it all paid for, and I want it gone. I heard some of my coworkers who came to you have done a similar thing, and could you help me with that? And you then have to calmly explain to them that potentially in their situation, it's not as apples to apples as what their former coworkers was. And now you're looking at saying, well, that might not make sense if we're taking out 80% of your account to eliminate some payments today. When are you planning to work forever? Because now you will have no future value here to generate that capital potentially.
Right.
So, everything is not one size fits all, and debt management is the first to be that. You have to custom fit it to the person and situation. There are rules of thumb to follow and a guide. We may look at that where if an interest rate is less than a certain amount or percentage, that we might say in our office, it might be a guide to say, depending upon the investor, it could make sense to maybe keep that payment because we think your rate of return will be higher. And vice versa. There's others where for safer investors, that might be a lower percentage because their return might be less in the future. So that guarantee of eliminating the debt is of higher value. But the reality is it has to be looked at on a case-by-case basis. And I think that's, at the end of the day, with a lot of these topics that we bring up, it can't just be water cooler talk, or sitting out at the campfire in the summer, having a drink with friends. okay to do those things and have a good time, but to then think the advice that they maybe have received from a professional they're working with is as apples to apples and applicable to your situation, generally is not the case.
Yeah.
You really need to go through that exercise of talking to a professional, hopefully someone in our office, that could then sit down and go kind of line by line of what outstanding debts do you have today? What is the interest rate, the monthly payment, the years remaining, and then take a snapshot of your overall plan and say, okay, maybe here's some ways we could tackle that. And you and I have both done this, being in this industry long enough, with folks from helping kids with student loan debt, or parents then with that portion of debt that they're responsible for into retirement, and then folks leading up to, saying, hey, I'm 5 to 10 years away, and I'd like to achieve X, Y, and Z, but how do I do that with the current obligations I have? Many times it could be just a sounding board of looking at refinancing, maybe setting up a payment structure to pay down a particular debt faster, and maybe put on hold or make the minimum payments on others. That's different techniques we could use to maybe leverage a strategy to help someone manage their debt more effectively. And then, lastly, there is sometimes a scenario where someone's wealth is large enough that it could warrant justification to say, yeah, let's take out a lump sum, pay that obligation off, own that asset, and then presumably reduce your monthly need down the road.
Yeah, and I know that you're sort of the czar of debt or something like that. Like, since I've known you, you've been in there preaching about, not always being debt free. I think that's probably an unfair phrase to use to sort of catch all, but being lean, right?
Yeah.
Being lean and efficient in your expenses. And so I'm curious, this might come out of left field, but as you're talking here, and I'm thinking about the conversations we've had with clients, which are many, do you ever address the habit, not just the debt and how do I get rid of it, but what's the habit that got this debt there? And I'm not saying somebody that has your typical normal debt load has bad habits. I'm saying that the folks where you run into problems are the folks that have an inordinate size of debt. There's a reason they have that. It might be bad luck. They inherited something, right? But in most cases, it's usually a series of decisions they made that got them there. Do you ever address that?
Yeah, it's definitely something we do discuss depending upon the circumstance. So probably a less serious one than what you've described as someone who's severely behind in terms of their payment structure. That's one I see less frequently. But using an example often for folks is vehicles. All of our clients still need vehicles because of where we live. There's not a lot of public transportation in Northeast PA. Right. So for our clientele, a new vehicle is something that comes up at a certain frequency. But our clientele is very broad. I have some clients that will own a vehicle until the wheels fall off, and that might be 10 to 15 years later. And then I have others that like a newer vehicle more frequently. So it may not make sense for the person that's going to turn that vehicle over in a normal environment where used cars are not appreciating in value, which again, this is a bit unique. So if we extrapolate that out and use history as our guide, this too will correct and we'll go back to vehicles depreciate over time versus appreciate. So someone who maybe likes a newer vehicle more frequently, it most likely may make more sense to just build that into your budget and make the monthly payment, because 2 to 3 years later, you're going to trade it in for another new vehicle. Right. Well, shelling out all that cash up front to then watch that depreciate and then do it all over again is probably a less efficient way than an investor who says, I hate trading in vehicles. I buy a vehicle that serves my needs today, and I own it for 15 years, and that thing will rust out before I decide to get another one because I don't like turning things over. Well, that investor may have a strong case to say, yeah, that's a long enough time horizon that maybe we don't need to involve a bank. So I mean, it's not a one size fits all, but that example is a way where I've seen clients on both sides that can make more or less sense to maybe pay something off. And, in terms of the habit, it's not right or wrong, but just some people trade their cars in and out more frequently than others. And someone that does that, in my opinion, depending upon circumstance, might want to take a closer look at, does it make as much sense to pay cash in that environment to then do it again 3 years later?
I feel like if I could narrow our job down to two main categories that we do for clients, it's absolutely managing their portfolios, helping them make those long-term decisions. But I would say helping them manage their debt, their expenses, their cash flow is
Yep.
probably right up there. It's the
Yes.
one that no one really talks about, but I would say we almost spend an equal, if not higher amount of time on that.
Yeah. And I think too, like sometimes I'll get questions on like, well, it doesn't necessarily mean we're going to sit down and say, well, you need to cut your cable bill and just go to Antenna TV and really get to that granular of detail. Probably not.
Yeah.
But we might look at the bigger picture that says, is your spending rate today sufficient for the lifestyle you're looking for? And then if not, then where are there ways that within your budget that you're spending bigger chunks of money? Tends to fall back on a couple common themes that we could say, are there ways that we could maybe modify that? So pre-retirees, folks 5 to 7 years away, might be in a position where they have 2 car payments today. A husband and wife or a couple comes in and says, we each have 2 car payments, we have a mortgage, but you know what, this car is going to probably be paid off here in the near term, and we're both getting ready to retire in a similar time frame within a few years of each other. Maybe we only need 1 payment, a vehicle payment in the future instead of 2. So we'll stagger them. So, maybe we'll keep this vehicle here and then we'll replace just one of them because we're both not working. Our commutes are not as robust as they were, where we need those very reliable vehicles because we don't want to be broken down the side of the road and inconvenience our day even further. So those are things that you might look at as a strategy that then would help alleviate some of that without even, paying a debt off, but just staggering when you take on that debt.
I feel like I feel like people just want. I almost wonder if that's why they hire an advisor, so that they can just say, you know what, I'm thinking about doing this, and they shoot you an email and they say, can I do it? Does it make sense? And you do you do the stuff they don't feel like doing, right? And you crunch the numbers, like, you should be good.
Yeah.
Or no, we got to be careful about that one. And I think it's probably important for people watching to understand, if you haven't worked with an advisor, if you're working with the right advisor, we're not retirement police, or we are simply telling you the black and white picture here and saying, hey, you're still in your lane. Right. But if, as we said earlier in another video, if you fall out of that lane, it's our job to say, hey, you're getting precariously close. A couple more things like this and you're going to be tipping over. We want to make sure that doesn't happen.
That's correct. And I think the other point too is sometimes clients are surprised, at least in our office, that is the level of detail we go into, that there's a persona that advisors only work in stocks and bonds and here's where you need to allocate. That there's so much more. That in our view, internally in the Stonehouse office, you're just barely scratching the surface of what you could do for a client if you're just talking about their portfolio. Not that that's not a crucial point, but there's all these intangibles in their financial life, like managing their debt. What's important to them? I've had several clients, as you've described to this point in our conversation too, that have came in with very manageable debt levels that say, I just want it eliminated. We don't want to move. We don't want to relocate. We love our home or our property, our farm, and we want to own it. And it makes sense. And that's fine. And then I've had other meetings where you're discussing with a client about what's important to them, and they say, well, in the next 5 years, relocation is really important to us. We really could see ourselves wanting to be further south, closer to children or grandchildren, whatever the circumstance may be. And you might look at their debt level and think, well, maybe we don't. Depending upon the real estate market, the time frame, what the replacement cost for that new home may be, you might say, you know what, it might not make sense to take a big chunk out today. Let's keep making payments and then kind of keeping more of that capital invested to potentially provide the ability for when they do come to that goal that's maybe shorter term than someone saying, well, hey, I plan to die in my home. Right. Not that that's a fun topic, but you think, well, geez, I don't ever want to move. So that's just, the circumstances could be very different, and that's the customization that has to come in. If someone is trying to give you a one-size-fits-all, specifically for debt management, they are doing you a grave injustice. It's not possible to tailor it for all circumstances. And that's really what I think a job of an advisor is to listen and to try and hear what a client's most important priorities are, and then evaluate their circumstance to say, here's how we could accomplish that. Sometimes it's very clear-cut, and what they're looking to do, we can help them accommodate, and we are basically being that confirmation as to what they thought.
It's kind of like a nutritionist or a trainer at the gym, right? Whatever your goal is, there is no There is no easy one size fits all. So whatever diet plan, whatever spending habits that we can help you with, it's about getting lean and mean with your expenses. And if you want to have some big years and you want to spend a lot of dollars, it's probably because you've done the right things in previous years to lead up to that. Yeah. You've managed the money well. You've managed the expenses. It's right. We always say it's not you can make as much money as possible, but if your expenditures go up, you always feel that angst in your body, right? If you balance that out, it should be a much more enjoyable ride, and that's what our job is, right? So I really appreciate you. I think this is a big topic in our office as we talked about, and I knew this video would go much longer than we anticipated, but there's a lot to unbox there. So
it's a financial coach. That's I think the main thing. Is we can be that sounding board to be that coach to help you talk through kind of what your plan is.
All right. Well, thanks, Coach.
Sure.
So if you find yourself in a situation where you're trying to sort out where to start, hopefully we gave you some good ideas here today. By all means, call us at Stonehouse. We have a team of folks just like Kirk who work with folks every day to line these debts up, to line up your expenses, and help you sort through it and just make sense of it. Get you lean and efficient in your spending and your savings for retirement. So I hope that was helpful. We'll see you on the next one.